What's up, guys? Welcome to Heavy Metal Football. This is Abhi. Today, we're going to talk about Joshua Zirksee. Why? Because I think we absolutely should, because he's just a fantastic footballer who's been absolutely misunderstood, right? So, before even talking about Joshua Zirksee, I really want to talk about the things that were spoken about him um, before even he had a proper run of games at Manchester United. And there are guys like Jamie O'Hara, Frank De Boer, who's his own countryman, coming up with random BS before even giving a guy who is probably new to the Premier League from a different country to not give him a run of games or a proper chance and to just write him off. It felt so absurd. And the worst part was uh, so many of the Manchester United fans doing the same thing. Like the most common things, common stuff that I heard about him in the initial days was that he's too slow. The game passes him by. He can't pass. He doesn't get inside the box. He doesn't score enough goals. And this was all before even watching him play and to see what he can bring onto the table, right? So I felt so unfair for him that I had to go back and watch a lot of the older United games from this season and understand his game even more to tell you guys. So I might be referring to my notes every now and then. So excuse me. So I've really understood. I'll be talking about what his game style is, uh, how he dribbles, what did and did not go wrong. So what went wrong and later what went right at United, and what is the best way to use him as a footballer, right? So even to talk about Joshua Zirkzee, I think we need to talk about football itself, right? So we are in a world where football has completely changed. It's become so athletic, so physical, and it is so much about speed and power. And we are feeding into this whole narrative that speed is all that you need to win football games or to judge a fantastic player. So if we live in a world like this, and so many of you feel like the game passes him by, there is some partial truth to it. But then there is so much more to his game than what we've actually seen, right? So this guy, Joshua Zirkzee, I think he needs to be protected because I think he's an anomaly in football. I think in the Premier League and in the world, there are not many strike players like him who are a center forward or a striker because the skill sets that he has brought in or he has is so underappreciated, right? So in a world where all the guys are running always, this guy seems like an anomaly and he seems to walk, and for some reason it is criticized. uh, but I think the way he plays, he is one of the very few players in world football who can actually dictate a football game. He can just slow the game down to his own speed or just fasten the game up, right? And these sort of players are just a dying breed. And these are the sort of players that I would pay my money to go watch play because they're so unpredictable and they can just change games um, at any given point in time, right? So I'm going to talk a little more about him uh, to maybe prove you guys wrong, or rather, let's just take this constructive uh, to just make you guys understand that he is a class act in world football right now. Now, right? Again, in a world where we see your speed merchants, right? So, who are the best dribblers right now? We can probably say Kylian Mbappe. Rashford is a really good dribbler. I'm not going to include Lamine Yamal in this. So I'm going to talk about a specific style of dribblers, right? Like your Mbappe, Marcus Rashford, Rafael Leao, etc. So these are guys who wreak havoc to the opposition defender. They are so powerful in their defense that like they just bulldoze their way uh, into the opposition. And Joshua Zirksee, he is just the opposite. Uh, he is not the one that dribbles to escape pressure. He invites pressure, right? He wants the opponent to come to him. In a way, he's a sort of a hesitation dribbler that he would just let a player come to him uh, when he drops deep and gives them hope like, yes, he has, hey, you have me, you can take the ball. But no, all of a sudden, he's just going to just go right and go left. And before you know, the defender is so wrong footed. His body positioning is just completely gone. And then there's so much space for him to run. And he's not the one who just runs with the ball, he glides with it. And for a guy who is 6'4", who most people called overweight, the way he moves with the ball, it is just absolutely elite level. And again, uh, most people do not even talk about the way he receives the ball. His his technical ability when he faces his back to the goal and when he receives the ball in the half turn, it is just butter smooth. It's just going to leave defenders, I don't know, they just all of a sudden they are at Timbuktu. And we've seen right now, yeah, you can see some of the clips that are there on YouTube. All of a sudden, these guys are saying Joshua Zirkzee is superb, and all the reels are coming in. But he was this right from the first 2 3 games at Manchester United, right? Another uh, really important aspect of his game is his passing. I think people are not talking about his passing. It's just absolutely a treat to watch. He can pass the football in so many different ways. He can use his outer foot, his inner foot, these driven grass cutters, and the weight of his passes and the simplicity in his passing. I think it is so underappreciated. In a world where your dribblers are coming in for pace and power and everything, he's just so miserly that it all changes in a flash of a moment. But in real, it looks like we're watching slow motion football, and that is a dying breed in modern football. Okay, so as we speak about his dribbling, I think we need to talk about him as a center forward. What is he as a center forward? Uh, Again, to talk about that, I kind of see the world where people hate him, right? Because modern day center forwards are again all about speed. So their primary job is to take the opposition defenders uh, to uh, their goal, to the running team's goal. And Joshua Zirkzee is the exact opposite. He withdraws and he drops in and tries to take defenders along with him. He's a forward who drops back and tries to take defenders along with him. And he is the guy who um, creates space for other players with his movement and with his dribbling and with his turning skills. So if there are players who are not going to capitalize on that, it is going to be a problem. because he everything that he does has so much purpose, right? He dribbles and moves not to get into space, but to create space where forwards are running into the space. This guy is the one who drops back to create space for others, right? And he's so in a way he's the absolute opposite to Erling Haaland, etc. And he runs into the box really late, right? So he doesn't rely on your speed and strength, although he does have this. Uh, he relies on his technical ability and his understanding of the game, which is again I feel is so underappreciated, right? In a world where players are told what they have to do, where they have to be at what given point, uh, Joshua Zirksee is a guy who needs the sort of a freedom. He's not the guy who's who's going to run in straight lines, but instead he's going to drop into space, create space and patterns of play for others to follow. Right? And another important aspect is that his game needs your wingers and midfielders to occupy the spaces that he leaves, without which it could be a problem. So typically, in a system that has predefined roles, where like you have coaches like your Pep Guardiola or Mikel Arteta, where if you've watched football and seen players talk about him, they have specific roles for their forwards where they are defined and told what they have to do at every given moment in time. And in a system like that, I feel a guy like Joshua Zirkzee could be quite ineffective, uh, because he's not going to have the freedom. And when he doesn't have the freedom, he's not going to be an effective player. And also, that in a system like that, when he drops in, it is going to confuse other players like your midfielders or your wingers who like uh, these below average players like Garnacho who always want to cut inside from the left, and Bruno Fernandes who again drops in to similar spaces. uh, I think it could be a little ineffective, right? uh, so how do you make use of a guy like Joshua Zirkzee? Because for a forward, I think his interplay and his general nature is that he's so unselfish. He drops in to create space for others to fill in, and he might be the guy who'll play through balls or to other players, right? So, in a general sense, he's a lot similar to Wayne Rooney, Roberto Firmino, etc. And these guys have scored goals. So, how do you make use of a guy like Joshua Zirkzee? Is that uh, you need to just give him his freedom, his space, and let him do what he wants. So, and a typical example for this is that uh, in the initial times at United, he did lose the ball, and there were times he wasn't good. But I also saw there were so many times he's dropping deep and receiving the ball when we had to. But then there are no players literally making a movement, or there was even no intent to from the other players to make any sort of moves. So, in a sense, that his effectiveness and his understanding of the game is also has a lot to depend on what his teammates understand of him and how they see him. Right? Again, In the initial times, he was again dispossessed sometimes and was a little ineffective because he's dropping into spaces where Garnacho wants to come in, Bruno wants to come in, and we have a wing back in Diogo Dalot, who's typically a right-footed player playing on the left, and his natural instinct would be to again cut inside and occupy the same spaces. So, in a system like this, I feel like a guy like Joshua Zirkzee is just playing against the system, or he's made to play against the system. All right, everything goes wrong, but then I feel in a to have a guy like Joshua Zirkzee, you need your wingers and your wing backs to run into the opposition half and receive the ball when he is dropping deep. And this started to change once we got Dogu and Bruno went into midfield, and guys like Garnacho started making little more runs inside, right? So that is when I think people started to really understand what he is as a footballer, right? He just started dropping in and dictating games, and Bruno thrived in the system. Even I think the presence of Joshua Zirkzee and his skill set made Bruno a better player in the second half of the season from midfield, where I felt he's had his best games at United. One is because he started becoming a little more tidy and he was attacking the spaces that um, Joshua Zirkzee was creating for him. And the centre backs from the opposition are so uh, wrong-footed and in wrong spaces uh, that we can start scoring goals. Although, in the general sense of play, United didn't score because we ended up conceding a lot more goals, right? So I understand why he could be a problem for coaches because he's going to um, vacate spaces, and if other players do not understand him, it could be a disruption. So this is where I want to talk about. I think how football should be played. If you have a guy like Joshua Zirkzee, uh, for that we need to talk about two styles, right? A positional play and let's say a relational system, right? To give an example of a positional play, I think again I already spoke about systems like Pep Guardiola and say a Mikel Arteta, where players have defined roles and their job is to be at a certain point in a certain in any given time, right? Uh, but the opposite of that is what I would call a relational system, where players move relation in players move in relation to how the other players move, right? To give an example, I think Carlo Ancelotti's Madrid were a typical example of that. Um, Without Kylian Mbappe, though, so you had your Karim Benzema's, you had your Rodrigo and Vinny Jr., etc. Uh, they didn't have a set space or a set position. They moved in accordance to others, and this was so beautiful to watch, even though they didn't have much of the ball, etc. But when they did, it was so unpredictable for the opponents to predict what they were going to do. So it is a system where I think smart players would thrive, and your leader and your elite level players would thrive. Uh, Too much systems and control are for players I think who are not as good, and I think that was another reason why, uh, even though without a lot of players, uh, I mean, with a lot of players injured, City somehow managed this season. I think they were poor, but they still managed because they are playing in such a system. Another example is I would even say Sir Alex Ferguson's United with Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez, and Berbatov all in the same team. Yet we had the ball, we attacked, we scored a lot of goals. It is because these guys knew how to understand each other, and they moved in ways where there are still positions filled, and this was creating havoc for opponents. But the byproduct of that is some fantastic football. But again, there might be one or two guys who you expect to score are not going to score. Another example is Berbatov, who was always criticized at United, but I think we all know he's a fantastic, fantastic footballer, right? So, how do you make use of Joshua Zirkzee? What system do you play Joshua Zirkzee in? I think he, a guy like Joshua Zirkzee, is the system, right? Because I can't define him. Is he a 10? No, he's not a 10. Is he a typical number 9 like your Erling Haaland? No, he's not. Instead, Joshua Zirkzee is a manipulator of space and time, right? He just freezes and drops deep and stops his motion so that others can run. In a way, he walks because other players can run. And in a world where uh, players are trying to avoid chaos, he thrives in it. The way he's cold blooded in games where he's just surrounded by two or three players and yet is able to find a pass. When you have players like that, you they are the system, and they're a dying breed of footballers and have to be protected. And if that is done, I think the teams that he's going to play in will just thrive and play the most um, beautiful football to watch. And that again is something we would pay to watch, because I don't know, most games these days are boring, especially the Premier League games, right? So that is it, guys. I really like him as a footballer, and we'll be talking more about a lot of other players as well. And I want you to guys uh, to watch the video and add in your comments and hit like and subscribe. We'll talk about another player. Thanks for watching. See you.